Women Innovators. Interviews with women with big messages and big missions, sharing their stories to inspire you to live your passion and step up to make the world a better place. Here's your host, Tami Patzer.
Hi, this is Tami Patzer, and I'm excited to introduce today's guest, Krista Callas. Krista is a scientifically validated energy healer who connects people more deeply with the life force inherent in nature. This life force energy, this intelligent grace, uplifts and enhances health at every level for optimal vitality and well-being. Krista's healing abilities have been authenticated through rigorous scientific research using cell-based and mouse models for overall health and quality of life, as well as vitamin D absorption. Welcome, Krista.
Thank you, Tami. It's good to be here.
It's exciting because those of you who have listened to my conversations with Krista before, you have heard us talk about all different types of things, ranging from writing and journaling to life force energy and the Trivedi effect. And one of our conversations, we were talking about writing and journaling, and my response was, oh, sometimes I'm afraid to go there. I will stop myself from journaling or writing because I'm like, what if something negative pops out on the page that I am not ready to deal with? And that kind of sparked this idea. And so Krista is back today to talk more about writing and journaling and that fear that sometimes comes up for us when we are looking at ourselves in introspection. So, Krista, welcome to the show today, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
Thanks, Tami. Yeah, when we were talking last time in the last interview, when you said, sometimes, I'm not sure I want to know what's going to pop out. And it was, it struck me because I'm kind of the opposite. I've always been the opposite. Like, I love it when things unexpected pop out on the page. I love that. But it occurred to me when you said that, like, not all of us necessarily have that orientation, or, there are times actually in my own writing too, when I'm going along and all of a sudden it's like you kind of slowly start backing away from it because you can feel that there's something big, there's something powerful. And sometimes we don't always feel ready to address that. And so I thought it would be a great idea to talk about the ways that happens, because I think it can happen along a continuum where one of the very first things that often comes up for people when they start journaling or writing in any genre really is the inner critic. And if you kind of keep going along that spectrum, there's the inner critic, and then there's like that place that we were talking about, like, I don't know if I'm ready to deal with what wants to come out, or I'm afraid of what might come out. And then if you keep going along that continuum, then there's trauma. How do we work with our inner trauma? And as you're writing and when you're in the flow, there can be trauma is like it's like a vortex. It can suck you in, and so you can feel the current going. You can tell the waterfalls coming. And so how do you work with that? How do you work with that in such a way that it can be something productive and have a positive outcome and can be transformative instead of just, kind of reliving the story and kind of just driving it deeper into our own nervous system, the traumatic part of it. So how do we work with things transformationally? Yeah.
I'd like to know about this inner critic, because again, I'm a very creative person, for example, but think about how less productive you are if you stop yourself from that process of creating something or writing, because of the fear of what happens, or what if some trauma comes up. And again, do I want to spend my day rehashing the old stuff? Because there has to be a way, like, let's say there was a traumatic experience, and I have a tendency to think that whatever happened to me wasn't all that bad. And I think that's why I don't want to look at it, because maybe it was worse than what I allowed it to feel. And that's why I know I'm not different, because you just don't talk about different things. And then you say, well, yes, this might have been bad, but boy, this person, that was really bad. If you look at these things on a spectrum of awful to really, really awful. And sometimes, like you said, that inner critic is like, well, who are you to have these feelings? Or why should you be writing about these different issues? But it's so funny, because I actually was just out in California with Bo Eason, who does personal storytelling, acting out your personal story, not only through words, but through your physicality.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting to see just his body language and the words. And he had the audience of about 700 people mesmerized. So right there, get rid of that inner critic, and you have a personal story that can actually be transformational. And I think you've said several things. You said the inner critic, how to get rid of that. You talked about, well, how do we use our stories for transformation? So there's just so much that you can do. But tell me more about this inner critic, and how can we, I guess, use it to help us get into transformation?
Yeah. My perception of the inner critic is that oftentimes it's they're echoes from the past. It's somebody else's voice, maybe, that we've internalized, from a very young age. And the thing about the inner critic is that it has a tremendous amount of vitality, has a tremendous amount of, some of us more than others, but it's energy that basically, it needs a better job than, hashing us apart. No matter how it shows up, whether it's on the page or in life in general, it looks and sounds different for different people, but we all know that feeling of we're undermining ourselves, or we're sabotaging ourselves, or in some way we're keeping ourselves from moving forward. And so for me, at times it has been like saying, like just what you said, like, who do you think you are? Or that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Like, you write something and it's like, I'm going, oh my gosh, that's like, is completely silly. But when you're writing, it's a time, there is a time to sit down and just let the creative juices flow. And when you're really in that place of flowing with the work, your awareness and your focus, it's like it's who you are, in that moment. All the time kind of disappears, the environment kind of disappears, because you're just in that flow. You're in the river of that wherever the story is taking you, or whatever you're discovering and writing about. And when the inner critic starts to pop up, what I've noticed about that is that it's an overview kind of a voice. It's hovering over you, going like, oh, look at that. That's no good. Or it's typically pretty mean. And I think it's really it's a developmentally immature part of ourselves, but at the same time, it has a lot of juice. So how do we give it a better job? So, for example, when you're in that flow and you start noticing like that, the critical voice coming in and starting to condemn and judge and limit, you have to know that you've gone out of that solitary place of being in the flow, where you're just kind of, the focus is so powerful and so strong in the movement of what you're doing. You've left that and you've split off from that, and now you have gone into, like, when there's editors and inner editing, you've gone to the land of other. There's that other voice then that is judging, criticizing, and to just recognize that shift. It's not necessarily a bad thing, because we do need to edit our work. We do need to, as writers, we do need to have that bigger overview of the work in general, but not necessarily the sabotaging part of it. So how do we start to tease that apart? And one of the things that I've discovered is that over time, as you work with it, journaling is a really good way of getting to know all those kind of, the way that the inner critic shows up in your own life. First of all, just recognizing that is really important, because if you can't recognize it, you can't work with it. And in working with it, what I do is I start to give it a job, like give it a better job. Like, okay, so this might not be the right phrasing. So then what is the right phrasing? What is a better phrasing? And that critical awareness innately knows how to slice and dice and split hairs. And, as a writer, it gets down to, like, okay, does this piece work as a whole? Then do the chapters work? Do the paragraphs work? Does the sentence work? Does this particular word work in this sentence? And that critic knows how to get in there and, like, pick out, like, nope, that's not the right word. And so it may start off being like, that's the dumbest word that you could have chosen. It may start out being that kind of mean, nasty voice, but if you ignore the nasty part of it and just listen to the part that is discerning, there's a positive in that discernment, that skepticism, that critical energy that knows how to kind of go right into what's the heart of the issue here. That's very helpful and becomes, over time, a really, really potent ally. If you can ignore the mean part of it and just focus on using the energy of it for furthering your effort, furthering your writing.
I think you're right. And one of the things about that inner critic is to say, okay, inner critic, you don't get to play right now. You have to wait until another time, because when you are in that flow, you really do need to just dump it and let it all come out. So without criticizing or worrying about spelling or grammar, or all of the little nitpicky things that a writer editor does pick on later. But I think you're right. That inner critic has a real value, but you cannot allow it to be there in the creative process, because
Right.
it will stop you and not
Exactly.
allow you to complete whatever the process is. But
Exactly.
you're right. There is a value in going back and editing your own work. Not to mention, you have to have other editors
Yep.
work on your work at
Right.
some point in the future, because sometimes we don't even see our own errors, and again, I'm talking about the publication process. In a
Right.
journaling process, obviously that's a different scenario than sharing your work with others. But it is funny how you were talking about how that critic will, you know, who do you think you are? That's the wrong word, or whatever it is about this process. But if you just allow it to flow, and tell that critic, okay, you'll get to play at another
Yeah.
time, uh,
Yep.
it's very helpful and useful.
Yeah.
You've done a lot of writing, and I understand that you are just finishing up, is it a 30-day challenge where you're writing like something every single day for Medium?
I have been writing every single weekday for
Oh, okay.
me.
So how has that helped you with your creative inner critic process? Because if you're trying to produce something every single day for publication, I'm sure that, did you have any revelations about this inner critic process during this challenge?
Um, not so much during this particular challenge, um, but I'll tell you, it's come in really handy because uh, I've written several entire pieces and then looked at them and gone, yeah, I don't think this is right, and just like put it on the back burner, and I'll think about it, and maybe I'll work with it and turn it into something else. But in general, no, it's been kind of a long process for me in terms of journaling, and also for many years I was working on a novel. And so it really is like going back to that, um really the choice. It's like a figure ground thing. Where do I want how do I want to be expending my energy right now? Do I want to be in that focused creative flow, or do I want to come up and out and have an overview of the piece as a whole, and the process that's underway? um uh I would say how it's shown up in the Medium challenge has just been getting to the end of writing the piece and then really questioning, like, am I ready to hit that publish button? Like, okay, maybe I need to read it. Do I need to read it one more time? um it's been a pretty interesting challenge in terms of just priming the pump of getting in that creative flow every single day. Every single day. I love the rigor of it and the discipline of it. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good point, because it goes back to my issue about journaling and introspection and allowing myself to feel. And I think that's a whole nother part of why people journal or write. It's because of, you have to allow yourself to feel. Like, I'm not a big crier, for example. It doesn't mean I don't feel, but I do know that over the years, because I had all these responsibilities of, taking care of children, working, going to school, doing whatever, that I had to tamp down a lot of that
Right.
internal stuff. And I, again,
Yeah.
and I'm being honest, even right now, I'm going, well, if I start writing about personal things, what's going to pop out? because I do a lot of writing that's professional, and
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
totally different type of writing. But what if I actually do start to look at this other side of me, and what if I tell the inner critic to, go away for a while? Because I use that critic a lot for editing and just for processing, because it's easy, you need that for business.
Right.
But again, your personal life is a whole nother
Yeah.
part of us, and feeling. And when I was a teenager, let's just say I was the poetry writer. I had so many crushes, the unrequited love. And I used to use a calendar, and I'd write the date and the time, because I wanted to remember what I felt like in that moment. So obviously I was as I was learning how to become who I am, I was using that. So that's very interesting. How useful do you think writing and journaling is to move you into a transformational place, or into having a better connection with the divine? Is it useful for that?
I believe so. It's been my experience that it's incredibly useful, because when we're journaling and we're writing about those more personal experiences, um, first of all, there's less pressure. So even if the inner critic shows up, it doesn't necessarily have to stop us. We can just keep going, because if we're not going to show it to anybody, it's just for our own personal investigation. Then we're not trying to be creative on a schedule, or we're not going to hit that publish button, which can soften it. But at the same time, there is such a deep and rich inner knowing, and we get to know ourselves better and better, because writing in a journal, all kinds of different reactions, responses, we get to know who we really are versus who we think we are, like the thought version of ourselves, and in that, there are, that what can be so transformational about it is that we begin to see patterns over time in our writing, that, oh my gosh, I always handle this kind of situation the same way, and it always has the same outcome, or a similar, like energetically similar kind of outcome. And that's going to give us the opportunity to, when we become aware of those bigger patterns, we can begin to work with ourselves differently to have a different outcome in our everyday life. So it's a very potent vehicle for self-examination. And then when you add in life force energy and life force energy transmissions to that, you have this incredible kind of there's a dynamic between the two that's very synergistic, because you're doing this deep investigation, but at the same time, the life force energy helps to raise our consciousness. So we're going to continually be seeing things through new eyes, and so we're going to have new perceptions, and we can track over time how we're choosing to do things differently, and what's working and what's not working, and it becomes really just an incredible synergistic, the way they work together. As the energy raises our consciousness, we begin to see things differently. And as we're writing, we become more aware of how we're doing things, how we're operating in the world, and also what our preconceived ideas of the divine are as well. All of it becomes grist for the mill and can show up in the journal.
That's really interesting. So with what you do with your life force energy transmissions and the work you do and your background in writing and journaling and your educational background, so do you work with people on this using journaling and writing kind of to connect to life force energy or to work on this connection within themselves? Because I can see a great value in having a mentor to help you, like somebody like me, who I'm going, oh, I'm afraid to write because what if, what if something comes up that I am not prepared to deal with or I don't want to deal with? How cool would it be to be able to contact Krista and say, you know what, Krista, I was journaling and something came up that I'm not 100% comfortable with. Can I talk to you about this issue? Do you work with people in that way?
I do, actually. I'm working with a couple of people, and who said, I always wanted to journal, but I just, for whatever reason, I never got around to it. And now they're journaling and they're finding value in it. And so, yes, I do. And I'm also in the process of putting together a course called Sacred Journaling about self-investigation through the journaling process.
Sacred journaling. I'm looking for a pen. Going, oh, I like that. No, I really like that a lot because to me, listening to you today, there's such a great value, and like you said, sacred journaling to work on this process of connecting within yourself so that you're connecting, the good and the bad and everything in between, like our inner critic, our ego, our soul, our spirit. I mean, we're all one. It's just that, and we all have different processes and purposes about moving forward. So what's the best way for them to connect with you so that maybe you could, set up, maybe you are going to have a beta group or something with this course that you're developing so they could get in on the ground floor of sacred journaling and get started sooner than later. I think that's really important to take action.
Yeah.
And that's something, when the universe, comes knocking, and if you're listening to this conversation, it's kind of like, hey, yes, it's you we're talking to, and to connect with Krista about this because, like I said, it's really important to allow yourself to get inside and to reflect and to move forward so that you can have that sacred journey with this sacred journaling. I think that's really important. So how can I connect with you?
They can connect with me through my website, which is kristacallas.com, KRISTACALLAS, kristacallas.com. They can find me on Facebook as well.
And what about your Medium, where you've been doing all these cool blogs? What is that called?
It's just under my name, Krista Callas. Definitely, stop by and read some of my pieces. I'd love to hear from people.
I've seen some really nice comments, and on Medium they do claps. I've seen some really nice comments, and I also saw that just the other day, one of your blogs was picked up by Medium to be promoted on the front page for mental health. It was all about laughter, and of laughter. And how cool is that to be recognized by Medium, which has literally millions of people going to check it out, and for your piece to have been recognized for mental health. That's pretty phenomenal.
Thank you. Yeah, I was really surprised and so happy to see that. And you know what, Tami, it just happened again yesterday. So
Oh, really? What was your topic this time?
The name of the piece was "If Home Was a Mountain." If home were a mountain. And they put it in their travel section. So
see, and again, for those of you people who want to be writers also, what's the secret? The secret is that Krista's writing regularly, pushing the button, and sharing her authentic stories and herself. And I think that's what real people want. We want connection. We want to know the real soul, the real spirit of each other. And you're proving it by the fact that Medium is picking up your articles. And again, how cool is that? Mental health and travel. That happened really relatively short time of becoming a publisher, because you're just publishing lately one thing on the weekdays. So that's really a phenomenal thing. And that's a little like insider trick or hack, I guess you could say, is like, how do you get published? Get published.
Right.
And, so Medium is a great opportunity for that. So before I let you go, Krista, how would you, anything else that you would like to say?
Just that it's a really incredibly rich and deep and joyful journey. And over time, it's incredible the transformation that can happen and the awarenesses that can come and the deepening in relationship to ourself and to the divine of our own understanding. It's really a beautiful journey, and when writing is a part of it, or really any creative endeavor, but what I do is write. So if you have any interest in journaling, or if you're already a writer and you want to work more deeply and investigate life force energy and how that might help your writing, please contact me. I'd love to work with you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Krista. Everyone, that's KristaCallas.com. Definitely go check out Krista's website. There's a lot of good information. And go check out Medium, Krista Callas. I think you have such great value to share, Krista. And I hope people go check you out and connect, because it is that sacred journey. You can, go deep with the sacred journaling. So that's pretty phenomenal. So everyone, this is Tami Patzer. Go make it a beautiful day.
You've been listening to Women Innovators with Tami Patzer. To learn more, please go to womeninnovatorsradio.com. And please do subscribe and share to spread the big messages and big missions to change the world.